You'd assume that once you can afford to buy a private jet, the hard part is over. You sign the paperwork, the plane lands on your schedule instead of the airlines, and every future flight is basically free. You already paid for the thing. That's the logic almost everyone uses when they imagine private jet ownership. It's also almost completely wrong, and the gap between that assumption and reality explains why some of the richest people on Earth deliberately choose not to own the jets they fly on. Start with the number people fixate on, the sticker price. A new light jet might run you 7 to 9 figures, and the largest long-range aircraft can cost well over $50 million. That number gets all the attention because it's the one you can point to. But in the economics of private aviation, the purchase price isn't the main event. It's closer to a cover charge, the price of entry into a much larger and much less visible set of costs that begin the moment you take ownership, whether or not you ever fly the plane again. Here's the part that surprises people: a private jet costs you money every single day it sits in the hangar. Insurance, hangar storage, scheduled maintenance inspections, crew salaries for a pilot and often a co-pilot who need to stay current and certified, recurring training, and depreciation don't pause because the plane isn't flying. Industry estimates commonly put fixed annual ownership costs for a mid-sized jet in the range of several $100,000 to over $1 million before the aircraft leaves the ground once. Then you add variable costs on top. Fuel, landing fees, catering, and per-hour maintenance reserves that can push total operating costs into the thousands of dollars for every hour in the air. The plane isn't a purchase. It's a second business you now have to manage, and unlike most businesses, this one has almost no revenue side unless you're willing to charter it out. That reframes the entire question. It's not can I afford to buy a jet? It's can I generate enough personal flight hours per year to make the fixed costs worth carrying? And this is where the math turns against almost everyone who isn't flying constantly. Aviation analysts have long used a rough industry benchmark: unless you're flying somewhere around 200 hours a year or more, outright ownership tends to cost more per hour than simply chartering flights as you need them. Most ultra-wealthy individuals, even ones who fly often, don't come close to that threshold. Which means the asset that looks like the peak of financial freedom is, for the majority of people who could technically afford it, actually the worst financial decision. So why does anyone still own one outright? Sometimes it's genuine high usage, an executive running a multinational company who is realistically airborne several days a week. But often it's something less rational. Status, privacy, control over scheduling down to the minute, or simply the psychological comfort of ownership. And this is the first real crack in the assumption. The visible flex of owning a jet and the financial logic of owning a jet are frequently two completely different decisions, made for two completely different reasons, and only one of them is about money. Now add the part almost nobody accounts for: going in, resale. New aircraft depreciate immediately and steeply, similar to a car driving off the lot, except the numbers are exponentially larger. A jet can lose a significant percentage of its value within the first few years, and older aircraft face an even harsher problem as they age. Buyers become far more selective, financing gets harder to secure, and maintenance costs on aging airframes and engines climb sharply. An owner who assumed the jet was at least a store of value discovers, usually when they try to sell, that it behaved much more like a depreciating liability that happened to have wings. This is where the chain reaction becomes visible. An owner buys expecting freedom and flexibility. The fixed costs accumulate regardless of usage. Actual flight hours turn out lower than projected, because life and business travel are unpredictable, not a fixed weekly commute. The cost per hour of actually using the jet balloons far past what chartering would have cost for the same trips. At some point, the owner does the math honestly for the first time and realizes they're paying a fortune to maintain the option of flying, not the flying itself. That's the moment many owners quietly exit, either selling at a loss, or moving into a structure that gives them access to jets without the burden of owning one outright. That structure has a name, and it's the clearest case study in how the smartest capital in the world actually approaches this asset. Fractional jet ownership: companies selling shares of an aircraft, guaranteeing owners a set number of flight hours per year while professionally managing crew, maintenance, and scheduling, solved exactly the problem outright ownership creates. Warren Buffett is the most documented example of this shift in thinking. For years, Buffett was famously skeptical of private jets, once nicknaming his own purchase the indefensible because it seemed to contradict the frugality Berkshire Hathaway was known for. But rather than avoiding the asset class entirely, Buffett did something more interesting. In 1998, Berkshire Hathaway acquired NetJets, the company that pioneered fractional jet ownership. Buffett didn't just buy access to a plane. He bought the business model that profits from everyone else's ownership math not working out. That's the real insight hiding inside his own joke about the plane being indefensible. The aircraft itself was a bad bet, but the system built around selling shared access to aircraft was an excellent one. That single move captures the whole hidden structure of this industry. The people who actually understand the economics best don't try to own the depreciating, cost-bleeding asset. They own the layer above it, the company that manages the fractional shares, the leasing structure, the charter brokerage, the financing. The jet is the product. The real money is in solving the ownership problem for people who haven't yet realized they have one. So what does someone actually get when they buy a private jet outright? Best case versus worst case. Best case. Extremely high, consistent usage, tax advantages tied to business use, and a genuine time-saving benefit worth far more than money to someone running a company across multiple continents. Worst case, and the far more common outcome, an underused, rapidly depreciating asset carrying 6 or 7 figures in annual fixed costs, eventually offloaded at a loss to someone who assumed, just like the previous owner did, that this time the math would work out differently. Underneath all of it, a private jet was never really about the aircraft. It's about buying control over time, the ability to leave when you want, land where you want, skip the lines everyone else stands in. That control is genuinely valuable. But almost nobody needs to own a $40 million machine to get it. They need consistent, guaranteed access to that machine, and that access can be bought, shared, or rented in a dozen smarter ways. The people who understand this fastest stop asking how do I own a jet and start asking how do I own the thing that owns the jet. That shift in thinking is the actual billionaire secret. It was never about the plane. The jet may be what everyone sees. But the real fortune is built in the business behind it. Because in the end, billionaires don't chase status, they chase economics.